Is everybody well?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
All good. All good. See some names there. Let me get the camera a bit closer. Maybe I can make this window a bit smaller. I'm just first time, just information, not that it's important, but I'm first time I'm using the continuity camera on the Mac. So could be a few teething problems, but hopefully not too many. There we go. I could actually see everybody's names now. Helpful. Fantastic. The screen's populating nicely. Definitely got the feeling already this is going to be a slightly larger meeting than has been last time. So let's see, we've got Andrew on the way in. Mokhtar on the way in, possibly.
I'm here, Ian. Mokhtar.
Ah, good. I think it only pops you onto the main screen on my device once you've actually enabled something like camera or decided not to have camera. So just Angela, then we can actually get this moving smartly, which is impressive to say the least. Okay, we just wait for those two that are sitting in the welcome lobby, whatever you might call that.
Where are you looking in? Because I can't see anyone in the lobby.
Oh, right. They're just appearing on the site. They're not appearing either on camera or not choosing to show the camera. Angela and Andrew Hitchens.
Oh, I've got them. I can see them as just not being on camera.
All right, that's fine. That's good. We can get started. Right. Wally's have asked me. Hello, everybody. Wally's asked me again to chair, which is my simple trying to facilitate and move this along as reasonably efficiently as we can. To that mind, obviously we want to focus in on the burning questions that people absolutely want to ask. Anything more technical or verbose, I would ask you to obviously rely a bit more heavily on email. If I understand correct from the last meeting, we're making sure those get moved around a bit more efficiently. I would ask people if you have a question, you ask a question, you obviously get your response, and then you have a follow-up question. Try to keep it maintained and single questions, not multiple chains of questions. Otherwise, it does get a little bit confusing. Because we have more members here, we're going to be asking for people to do digital hands up, and I will only basically ask for somebody to speak when they have their digital hand up. And hopefully, as you're speaking, I'll take that digital hand down so we keep it organised and move on quite efficiently. As say, I'm acting as chair. I will contain any questions I have as a resident, since I am a resident, to the resident section of our agenda. So I will go through as it appears on my screen and ask the people to introduce themselves. Henrik.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Henrik Adamchuk. I'm a member of this committee on behalf of Silverdale Parish Council.
Fantastic. Rupert Alcock.
Yeah, I'm Rupert Adcock. I'm a borough councillor, one of the borough councillors for the Silverdale ward.
Okay. Michelle, I assume that's Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm here on behalf of Wallace Quarry, and I usually take the minutes for these meetings.
Fantastic. Andrew Hitchens.
Yes, I'm here on behalf of the Environment Agency. I'm their project executive for the work of Wallace Quarry now.
Okay. Simon Tagg and Company.
Hi, Ian. Yes, Simon Tagg, County Council for Westers and Thistlebury, and one of the Staffordshire County Council reps. I've also got Derek Upfield here who will introduce himself, who's sort of hopping onto my connection here. Go on, Derek.
Yeah, I'm the Staffordshire County Councillor, right, to represent Keele, Silverdale and Notton, right, on the County Council, and I'm here, right, to listen in very carefully on what's been said. It's quite a time since I attended this meeting, right, of the liaison, so it could be very, very interesting.
Neil Goodwin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Neil Goodwin. I work in the planning regulation team at Staffordshire County Council.
Mukhtar Sheikh.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mukhtar Sheikh. I work for the regulatory team for the Environment Agency.
Wallace Quarry.
Paul Lealman, Operations Director, Wallace Quarry, and I'm with John Clues, Technical Director, and Nigel Bourne, CEO.
Amanda Morgan.
Hi, I work for Regulatory Services along with Nesta Barker, so I'm representing Newcastle Borough Council.
David. We'll just stick to that part.
I am Dave Jones. I'm the Borough Councillor for Keele Ward.
Robert Betley-Smith.
Yeah, hi. Robert Betley-Smith. I'm a Borough Councillor for Thistlebury.
And last but not least, obviously I haven't mentioned myself yet, but Angela.
Hi, I'm Chair of the Thistlebury Residents Association.
Okay, and I think everybody's had a word there. I'm Ian Barnett. I'm a local resident, not too far from the monitor on Gallingale View. Nearly forgot my road for a moment there. I've been asked to chair this meeting again, just to move things along. And I have over 20 years experience in the air quality sector, so that helps on occasion. So let's move on. I think that's all parts of welcome. So move on to apologies. Michelle, are there any apologies you need to be aware of?
I haven't had any actual apologies, just a couple of stand-ins. So we were due to have Jacqueline Brown standing in for Stephanie Talbot. As Amanda's already said, she's standing in for Nesta Barker, and we were due to have Matt Melvin standing in for Celia Jarrett.
Okay. For clarity, I'll just basically ask you for the various points, and I do hope that people will chime up when it's their moment to shine. Okay, moving on to item 3, minutes of the last meeting. Any comments or amendments on the last minutes that need to be addressed? Everybody happy with the minutes and accept them as minutes of our last meeting?
Yep.
I'll take your silence as a volume. Okay, so moving on to item 4, matters arising then. Any matters arising from the minutes? Anybody?
Sorry, Ian, I'm trying to get my hand up here.
I can't see a digital hand up there, but I'll take it as read that you have a hand up there, Angela. There we go. I do see it. Please, matters arising.
Okay, just under matters arising. Did we ever get the figures re the capping of the site to date, now that we know the surface area that is to be capped? I think those were asked for at the last meeting. And was there a response to the issue raised by the Staffordshire County Council on double parking on site? And were there any conditions attached to the permission granted by the County Council? And did we receive a second report from EGNIO on the possible sources of nuisance which I think was mentioned, but I'm not sure we've actually seen it yet. Just one or two other things. Do we have any data from the Borough Council on air quality or nuisance? I don't think we've seen
Can I
anything
just stop
yet.
you there for a moment, Angela? Do apologise. Can we just do in granular fashion? Is there any particular people that you need to direct these towards, and can you deal with them individually, please? Otherwise, it gets a whole list that gets very confusing.
The first set of questions were for Wally's Quarry, I think, and for the SCC, who seemed to know what area what amount of land has been capped and what the overall measurements of the site were to be capped.
So Wally's, and then who was it? Sorry again, Angela, I missed that.
Sorry, these are for Wally's Quarry.
All of these. Right.
I'll take that.
Can you deal with it before the pile gets too big, please, Wally's?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of overall area, Angela, it's greater than 80% of the available surface area. It's capped. I don't have the absolute figure with me today, although I do know it, and we do have it recorded, but it's greater than 80% of the surface area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it doesn't appear I can actually put down the hand, so either maybe Michelle could do that for me, or I didn't see there different controls on this version of. Otherwise, it's going to get confused and I can't actually take digital hands down. Thank you. Okay, Angela, did you actually have more points?
Sorry, those are the ones.
Your hand is back up again.
So, sorry, I can't put it down. I think at the SCC, they questioned with regards to the double parking on site and whether that would allow for emergency vehicles. And I just wanted to know whether that had been resolved.
Yes, effectively that actually was resolved as part of the planning application. I can probably give a bit more detail of that when we get to that section of the agenda.
Okay, and the other one was about the Agneol second report on other odours.
Who's that to? Sorry, Angela.
Sorry, that's to Wally's Quarry again.
Okay.
Angela, I'm not aware of the Agneol report that you're referring to there.
I think there was reference to a second report. We've had the first one, and there was a reference to a second one.
It's not a recollection I have relating to Agneol carrying out of that work or being authorised to carry out that work, Angela.
Okay.
Okay, Henrik, I see your hand up.
Yes, Angela, I think, is referring to the final report on mine water. There was an interim report done in 2021, and we're expecting a final report by the company using their consultants, who were claiming that some of the hydrogen sulfide that was emitted was a result of mine water ingress into the body underneath the actual landfill itself. So it's the final report that we're interested in, whether that's going to be published or whether we know anything more about it.
Henrik, I'll look through the many reports that we have, review what we've got, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you, John.
Same for you, Angela.
Any more matters arising?
Yeah, Ian, I also wanted to ask you if we've had any data from Borough Council with regard to their air quality and nuisance and visits by officers, the number, findings, number of complaints, investigations and outcomes. We don't seem to have had any of that data.
Was that to? Apologies, Angela. What was that again?
Sorry, that's to the Borough Council. It's
okay, I thought you said it was to me. I think, how do I have this information? Yes, please. If it's somebody from Borough Council can.
Hi, Angela. It's Amanda. I do have the complaints that I can give you. With obviously in relation to the last liaison meeting. So if we look at sort of 3 months back from that, July came in at 54, August was 79, and September was 53 complaints. If you need further information regarding the Jerome readings, etc., then I could send that through after the meeting.
Okay, yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. I see a hand up from Simon Tagg.
Thank you, Chair. Just to help Councillor Dukakis-Smith, I think really the information is published on the website on a quarterly basis. I mean, when I've given my apologies this meeting, I've made the company aware of the latest Cabinet report and the link to that, which I asked them to share with this committee, where it's got all the information on complaints, on monitoring equipment, the actions of the Borough Council on the abatement notice, and also that important Jerome in-house monitoring data. And if we could probably let Councillor Dukakis-Smith have the link to that, I think that will help her.
I'm not here as a councillor, by the way.
But you're a councillor now, congratulations.
No, I'm not here on this committee as a councillor.
But you have a role as councillor, so I'm calling you councillor.
Sorry.
Okay.
You didn't.
Okay. Is that all the points of matters arising? I'll take that as read. Okay, on to item 5, Wally's Quarry site update. Over to you.
Ian, just so you're aware, Jacqueline Brown, Councillor Jacqueline Brown has joined the meeting now.
Yeah, I did notice the screen jump. Thank you. You should.
Apologies, I couldn't. It wouldn't let me in. Apologies for being late.
No problems. Actually, since it's we've moved on a little bit, but before we move on to the next point, can you just introduce yourselves to everybody so everybody knows?
Yeah, sorry to hold you up, guys. Councillor Jacqueline Brown, ward councillor for Silverdale.
Thank you. Very succinct. Back to you, Wallace.
Michelle, are you sharing the presentation? Perfect, thank you. If you move on, first slide's the aerial shot. It hasn't changed since the last Wally's Quarry presentation, since the last liaison meeting, but gives an overview of site from just around summertime, July, I think, from memory, just to give reference to discussions. Thank you, Michelle. The current site operations, access continues through the site entrance and along the Southern Access Road. It's an internal road which was created to gain access to cell, principally to cell 4, which is the main focus of operations continuing on the facility. That's in the southeast quadrant. Some operational activity occurs along the southern flank towards cell 2, but the main focus is cell 4 presently. Horizontal wells, which are installed in line with the landfill gas management plan, continue to be installed as the operational areas develop and infilling operations continue. The expansion of the landfill gas infrastructure is complete. To give reference, that is the main actions that were listed in the landfill gas management plan in Appendix A. That includes the extension of the southern and western gas mains, including increasing its diameter to 315 millimetres. Flow lines from wells within permanently capped areas have been increased in diameter to 90 millimetres. And there's an ongoing development of the site-specific gas balancing plan for the Wally's Quarry facility is ongoing. Thank you, Michelle. Within the period, 7 additional pin wells have been installed in the western flank. Landfill gas capture is ongoing and increasing, with the site recovering 3,000 metres cubed per hour, apologies, on average. It fluctuates, so sometimes it's a little bit above that, sometimes it's a little bit below, but the average is around 3,000 metres cubed an hour. That's enough electricity generated to supply approximately 500 homes. Landfill gas management, 5,000, sorry, I do apologise, I keep getting the figures wrong, 5,000 homes, thank you, Nigel. The landfill gas management plan is currently under review with submission expected to the agency. 2. Leachate continues to be treated on site with good throughput, seen through the treatment plant despite the cold weather, with additional tankering as needed. Thank you, Michelle. Bird and pest control is continuing on site. It's on its winter schedule. There's a variety of deterrents used, such as noise deterrents, distress calls, gas gun and rockets. The use of raptor birds and lures to actively deter scavenging birds, principally from being at the facility. Permanent capping works phase 1 is complete. The blinding soils which go over the top of the capping is continuing and will be placed across the cap as those materials are available to us. Temporary capping works phase 2 and the upper southern flanks are now complete. Some maintenance work is ongoing to keep the caps in good serviceable condition through the winter. And as I touched on earlier, greater than 80% of the available surface area of the landfill is now capped, and there's a slide later in the presentation that gives that representation. And it's a significant investment that's gone in 2022, something of the order of 600,000 of capital gone into the capping works. Thank you, Michelle. Capping and phasing plan was reviewed and agreed with the Environment Agency, and I'll touch on that on a slide shortly. The development of the surface water management plan is ongoing, so that's seen the creation of berms, bunds and channels to channel surface water as it's collected on permanently capped areas through 2 newly created storage lagoons to off-site discharge. Those works are ongoing and will be as the site continues to be developed. Planning application was submitted and approved by Staffordshire County Council to permit the opening of the site entrance at 6 AM. Touched on earlier about the parking, which Neil's going to cover off. Where necessary, it'll allow the site to open the gate at 6 and allow parking on site off the highway parking prior to our operation starting at 7. There's continued regular liaison with Newcastle on a monthly basis, and the sharing of relevant information has commenced. And I just draw everyone's attention to the Wally's Quarry website, where there's regular updates posted there for people to view. Thank you, Michelle. I touched on it earlier. That's an overview, relatively recent. So our current operations are in the south, which is towards the base of this plan. And you can see how the surface area is split up in the various different capping systems that are deployed on site, both permanent and temporary. And you can see from that aerial view and schematic overlay that it's quite extensive, or is extensively capped as a facility. Thank you. Touch on the capping and phasing plan. It's been updated following review and approval by the agency. So this schematic is looking broadly north-north-east and shows cell 4 in the bottom right-hand corner of the image. And it's basically broken up into the different lifts and different areas that we'll be infilling as we go through the next phase of infilling at the facility over the next 12 months or so. Thank you. Future operational plans continue to work in cell 4. That's aligned with the capping and phasing plan. Continued installation of cover materials above phase 1, those blinding cells I referred to earlier. Development of the landfill gas management plan, the next version, submission and approval with the agency in due course, which I would think is in 2023. And further development of the gas collection infrastructure as it's appropriate. And I think that's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay. I do see one hand up from Henrik. Henrik.
Yeah, blinding soils. Can you, I'm not a chemist, can you just tell us what blinding soils are, please?
Yeah, of course, Henrik. So essentially, as the permanent cap goes on the facility, and you can see that as a black membrane laid on the facility, that requires a specific type of soil put on top of it for 300 mil of depth. It's essentially a fine-grained soil is needed. Those are driven through the markets or available as and when the market dictates, and those are placed above the permanent cap to help protect it from the restoration materials that go on in due course.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I believe there's one from It may be Simon, it may be Anne Company.
It's Anne Company.
Yeah, it's me, Derek Upfield again, right? I've read this and listened very carefully on what's being said. And first of all, can I just make the first point, because you did say only ask one question at a time. So I want to
ideally, yes.
Yeah, right. So I like to follow your instructions, being as you're the chair. Otherwise, it causes disruption. Not like the young lady started off with in the first place when she rhymed off a dozen off. Can I just say, first of all, as far as your capping's concerned, right? Can I ask the question of when you think the first phase of capping that they've already started, right? When will that be finished? Have they any idea on that one?
If I understand the question, Derek, so the first period of permanent capping was done in 2021 and was finished in April 2021. The capping programme for 2022 is now complete, with phase one is complete. Does that answer your question?
Can I just say, when I look through my bedroom window upstairs, it doesn't look as though it's complete unless, you know, I'm completely disillusioned with it.
Right.
Okay. So when you talk about the capping, you don't just mean just the top bit, right, the side. It's down the sides as well, because you're going to cap, you've got to cap the whole lot, haven't you?
Are you, just so I understand your question, Derek, are you talking about the capping of areas that are currently operational? So the overall capping of the facility in totality?
No, the capping of the site, right, that isn't operational now, right? When you look from the Silverdale Road, right, to the Halfway House or the Cherry Hill Lane, and you look across, right, the first part, right, that you did fill in, right, you started to cap that off, but you haven't finished it yet. It looks as though there's only one part of it that's capped.
Are you referring to areas where you can see the black geo membrane?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the capping. So that programme is complete. The blinding soils are coming in daily, and those are placed regularly across the top of the geomembrane, and that will be finished as and when those materials are available to us to allow that to finish.
But that is part of the capping, the soils that cover your lining that you've already put on. Am I correct?
It's not. It depends how you see it, but it's not forming the cap. So the main cap is the plastic membrane. That is the impermeable barrier that's put on and fully welded. That's the cap. So as part of the overall regime includes the soils and the restoration materials that go on, but the capping is the geomembrane.
Yeah.
You have additionals, Derek?
Can I ask another question now?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. The county council, the planning department to the county council, right, they passed for the wagons to go in and park up, right, at 6 o'clock in the morning. Can I ask that you can give the company can give assurances, right, that those wagons will not tip before 7 o'clock? Taking in consideration, we live in a valley, right, and the noise levels will be absolutely tremendous if they start earlier in the middle of the night, as I call it, right, when there's nobody about and it's all quiet and people are in bed. Can we make sure, or can the company make sure, right, that they don't tip at 6 o'clock in the morning, right, that they stick to the agreement that was laid down by the county council in the first place at 7 o'clock and not before? I think they need that assurance.
I'm happy to take that, Derek. Thank you for asking the question. Tipping has never taken place before 7 a.m. and it will continue not to take place before 7 a.m.
But you haven't let the wagons on site to park up until you've just had planning permission of the county council, right? And the wagons will be going in, parking up at 6 o'clock, right? And they're supposed to start emptying them at 7. Can you assure the residents that you won't start the tipping until 7 o'clock?
Thank you for the question, Derek. There's never been any tipping on the site while we've owned it before 7 o'clock, and there'll continue to be no tipping on the site before 7 o'clock.
Okay, is that from you, Derek? Is that all your questions?
At this moment in time.
Thank you. I see Rupert Adcock hand up. Rupert?
Yes, thank you. I noticed that you mentioned about pest and vermin control as part of the presentation. And I don't know if I'm right, but it will mention about birds. But what's going to be in place to deal with other kinds of vermin, such as rats?
Yeah. So there's a pest management plan as part of our management system, Rupert, which deals with a variety of pests, including scavenging birds, including rodents. So there's a variety of control. The reason I reference particularly birds is that it's an emotive pest that's very visible. So I reference in particular at this time of year where there's a tendency for them wanting to land in effect and keep warm on a landfill. So that's the reason for just specifically mentioning birds, but there is controls in place to manage rodents.
Can you give any more detail briefly of what those controls are for rodents?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Like I say, it's outlined in the pest management plan, but essentially includes observations and checking, baiting of key areas where you may see rodents. And in our experience, rodent life on Wally's Quarry is very, very low.
Okay, thank you, Rupert.
Thank you.
Any more questions to Wally's? All gone quiet. Okay, I believe then, unless there's more points, we can move on to. Oh, John, I see your hand up. Do apologise. I just noticed it before I moved on.
Rupert, would you like a copy of the pest management plan? It's a available document. It's part of a permit document.
Yes, please.
Okay, that's fine. Not a problem. Happy to help.
Excellent. Okay, now moving on to item 6, which is Environment Agency update, and I believe this is being handled by Mukhtar.
Thank you, Ian. Michelle, if you could just share the presentation, that would be great. Thanks. Yeah, so the first slide is just an opening slide as per previous presentations. So next slide. So that's the odour complaints that we've received from the 19th of September to the 12th of December, which is the Monday just gone, and that's essentially the quarter that we've just passed. So up until the week just gone, where we've had a particularly heavy cold spell, the numbers of complaints were relatively in about on average about 15, with the occasional elevated episode. But I think things have improved. Certainly, if you look at the presentation from previous quarters, things are going in the right direction in terms of odour complaints. As to why and the reasons why we've had a slight increase in the last week or so, and that's mainly down to the weather, really. Obviously, it's been particularly cold. There's been a lot of low wind speeds, which hasn't helped with dispersion. So it's the same source, it's the same volume of fugitive emissions, but it hasn't dispersed, which is why, if you look at the MMF data, again, there's been a slight rise there, and that represents the increase in odour complaints there as well. Thank you, Michelle. Next slide, please. So in terms of compliance activities, so the total so far for 2022 is very similar to where we were this time last year for 2021. It's a very similar number, both for site visits and audits, and also procedures and report data reviews aren't too far off from the figure from last year either. In terms of complaint breaches, it's 9 so far, and that's obviously we haven't included car forms which are still within what we call the challenge period or the review period, which when we issue a car form, we allow the operator to come back with as many comments and obviously it can be reviewed. Okay, next slide, please. So in the last quarter, the total number of site visits is 6, so it's a reduction from the previous quarter, and that is mainly because a lot of the engineering improvements that we identified in previous visits and previous audits, a lot of that work has now been completed. And in fairness, a lot of that engineering work, a lot of it does happen during the summer. So obviously, as you head towards the autumn and the winter, a lot of that work is is on standby until the weather's improve, get better. So there's less of a need. And also, there's less of a regulatory need for us to visit the site, and that's twofold. A, things are much better than they have been. There's less engineering work that needs to be done. So yes, that explains the number. Having said that, just to put, give a bit of a context. So normally on a landfill, we would typically visit a landfill on average maybe 4 or 5 times a year. So that number of 6 represents what we've visited in the quarter. So still, an increased regulatory effort, compared to other landfills. But yes, a reduction from previous quarters. And again, procedure and data reviews, the total numbers, again, similar to site visits, reduction compared to previous quarters, but nevertheless higher than what we would normally do at a landfill. Thank you, Michelle. Next slide. I'm not sure you can see the figures, a bit small, but just if I just sort of break it down for the last quarter. So in the last quarter, we have seen periods where, all 4 MMFs have registered, 0. So that figure first, is the percentage time that the MMFs pick up a reading that's above what we call the odor threshold, which is 7 micrograms per meter cubed. So that figure of 7 micrograms per meter cubed represents a value where the average person could probably, if it's above that in terms of hydrogen sulfide, they'd be able to detect an odor and for it to cause a nuisance. Obviously, some people detect it at much lower, some people will detect it at a much higher value, but that's the average, and that figure comes from the WHO, the World Health Organization. So yes, there have been periods where all 4 have registered 0. And I think that the biggest change you'll notice in the figures there is for MMF1. So MMF1 has been 0 for many months, but I think in the last week in November and also the first week in December, we saw a bit of an increase there. And on the flip side of things, we actually saw a figure of 0, MMF9, which hasn't happened as frequently. And the reason for why MMF1 was higher and obviously MMF9 was 0 is mainly down to conditions where the wind's been simply changed direction. And again, looking at the figure for, as I mentioned, for the week just gone, again, it's due to the cold spell, dispersion not happening as good as it normally does when wind speeds are much higher, and obviously the colder temperature means that the area is that much more denser. But just a bit of a further explanation, really. So just comparing, these figures to last year. So, are there been months where you're thinking, okay, the percentage, above the annoyance threshold is still similar to previous months? There's not been much of a change. So although it's higher above that odor threshold, what these figures don't show is the amount it's higher. So like I said, the odor threshold is 7 micrograms per meter cubed. So in the past, where we've had, a similar MMF, percentage above the odor threshold figure, it's been, correct, last year, in the hundreds of micrograms per meter cubed. Whereas in these instances, yes, it's above the odor threshold, but the amount is actually above the odor threshold isn't as high. It's a lot lower. It's still, about 25, 30 micrograms per meter cubed. So it's substantially lower than what it was, previous quarters and last year. Next slide, please, Michelle. I think that just a disclaimer, really, just say the figures that we've just quoted in the table before, it's still unrectified data. It's what normally happens. So, the air quality monitoring review the data, make sure the right calibration factors have applied, and it's, it's verified, and we have confidence in that data. And once all those checks have been done, we then release it on what we call a monthly report. And obviously, UKHSA then obviously review the report and obviously produce their own findings, and a report by them is also issued. Thank you, Michelle. Next slide. Okay, so this slide is just from the previous presentation, so the figures have been updated. So could you move to the next slide, please, Michelle? So yeah, so this continues our engagement with the community. So we still have a Facebook, page where we take on questions, which we hope to answer. And obviously, we've got a fair few views on some of the MMF videos that we've released, so explaining how the MMFs work. Andrew, is there anything you want to add on that particular slide in terms of comms and what we've done recently in Facebook videos and so on?
I know, that's fine, Muxer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Next slide. I think that might be the last one. Any questions?
Okay, the first hand that I saw pop up would be Angela's. So Angela, you have a question?
Yes. Could I ask if the data from the Environment Agency is anyway linked up with the data that's coming from the Borough Council's Environment Department, the stuff that they collect?
No, it's not, Angela. So we have our own dedicated monitors, which are what we call MCERT. So they're recognised standards. So that's the only monitoring equipment we use. whilst we share data and obviously, regulatory partners with the Newcastle Borough Council, we don't actually, how can I put it, use their data for our findings and so on. Not at this moment.
Would it be helpful if you did?
I think if you're referring to the Jerome monitors, where they doing readings inside the house, is that what you're referring to? Those kind of monitoring readings?
Any findings that are off-site, that's all.
The data is shared, and if we feel it's going to be useful to us, we do use it, but not always for regulatory purposes.
Okay.
Like I said, thank you.
Okay, and you finished, Angela?
Yes, thank you.
The next quick on the draw was Henrik. So Henrik, you had a question.
Yeah, quite concerned about the numbers for the last week. 14.3 for Gallingale, 5.1 for Pumping Station. These aren't good figures, given it's early days and the numbers have to be verified. From past experience, December, January and February tends to be the times that we do get raised levels, and that often shows itself in the numbers of people who complain and go through the various systems. If I don't want to ask a hypothetical question, do you have a concern about that particular week, or are you content that the weather conditions explain the rise from the previous reduced levels, which in many weeks, many days, were zeros? Would you like to tell us a bit more, please?
Okay, so I totally understand. Yes, it is a jump from or an increase from previous weeks, and it is down to Met conditions. But like I said, I mean, what the figures don't show you or don't tell you is how things have improved. I agree. Like any landfill, when we come to the winter months, the air is that much more heavier, the winds are that much lower. They don't, obviously, the landfill gas, the fugitive emissions don't disperse. So with any landfill, we do get a higher number of complaints come the winter months, and obviously this site is no different. But like I said, the amount, in terms of the hydrogen sulfide levels that we were picking up this time last year, if I give you an example, if, the figures may show we were 14%, 15% above, the odor annoyance threshold, last year, and obviously you're saying the same figure this year. But that's it. What it doesn't show is the amount it's been above. So last year, yes, it was above the odor annoyance threshold, for similar figures, it possibly even higher. But what it doesn't tell you is the amount. So last year it would have been 100, 200, micrograms per meter cubed for hydrogen sulfur, whereas yes, it's over, but it's like, it's 20, 25, still over the odor threshold, but obviously by a lot less. So yes, it's, the figures are increased. Obviously, coming the winter months, obviously they will sort of, be higher than previous warmer months, but we'll have to see and see. But there's nothing from my understanding, that John and Paul come in that's happened on site that's any different that would say, okay, this is the reason. As far as we know, and the intelligence and the information that we have today seems to suggest that it's due to Met conditions.
Okay, thank you, Henrik. Though it's jumping the queue, I noticed John or Wally's put the hand up, so there may be something to feed in at this point.
Sorry, Ian, can I jump in and say, can we let Andrew in just to sort of, help explain that bit better, if Andrew may have something more to add? That's okay.
Yes, thanks, Mukhtar. And all I was going to add is, I think looking at the data over a period of sort of 3 or 4 months, one of the things that we have concluded is that if you like, the percentage signals that we've been reporting every week are now less helpful than they once were, for the exact reason that Mukhtar has explained. In the past, you saw a very good correlation between the percentage readings and the number of complaints, because the figures, the magnitude of the exceedance of the odor threshold was so much higher that it gave a very good correlation. Over recent months, that has dropped away quite a lot. So on the weeks where we get 0% of exceedance, we can still get quite a large number of complaints. And on the weeks where we get a couple of percentages, the complaint numbers don't change that much. So we are reviewing the usefulness of the information that we provide. because it's become much less clear a signal now that the overall fugitive levels on the site are much lower and the source of the H2S is much lower. So I think coming to your specific question, Henrik, about, does it give us cause for concern? I think we've always known that when we hit some really cold, really still weather, we would probably see worse results than we've seen historically. But actually the results haven't been particularly high. It hasn't had a big impact on complaints. So I think we're still confident that the contain, the kind of capture and destroy strategy is still working and it's still moving in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Very timely. I believe John, I did say John next.
I was just going to come in. I was just going to come in, Ian, on a couple of points raised. So in terms of on-site activity, there is nothing currently going on that's out the ordinary or would give rise to a concern or a correlation with the reading. So there's no activity that is going on currently beyond direct landfilling. So there's nothing that I'm aware of that would contribute. We're a little surprised at the results this week and haven't had long to review and think about them. But when the cold weather came, we actually doubled our order tours. So we normally do one a day. We're doing 2 a day, just out of best practice in terms of looking what's going on in the local area. And again, that's ongoing and will be ongoing for a period of time until the weather subsides.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, thank you for waiting, either Simon or Derek.
Yeah, it's me this time. Thank you for the responses from EA and from the company on that. I think we're in this almost a $6 million question period, aren't we? Is this weather going to recreate what we had the last 2 winters? As this has really sort of become a problem, and I think at the moment we don't seem to be seeing that. I think when we don't see the odours in the town centre at the levels that they were, or the extended period up to 3 miles away, which we were getting before, that is way more than we would expect from a landfill, and we're not seeing that at the moment. But I think it's a watching brief. So one of my questions, but I'll just do one, is that obviously the long-term monitoring of this site is really important. We won't know the true picture until we've done probably a year of monitoring since the level started to drop, which is really after May time, the end of the spring this year. So is there any commitment from the EA to continue to have those monitoring sites in operation going forward, because that's what the residents will want to see. They'll want to see, the concentration of the Environment Agency continuing to monitor this and to react so that the company can react and also the EA can react to any problems.
Okay,
you want me to take that, Mukta?
Yeah, you can do, Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very good question, and sort of the monitoring strategy that we have employed is kind of not just for the Environment Agency's regulatory work, it's also for the other SCG partners around, particularly the UK Health Security Agency and the assessment they make of sort of the health risk. So there are conversations going on in the Strategic Coordination Group. So that's the SCG that I mentioned earlier around the future of the monitoring facilities, and the answer to that we haven't come to yet, but in terms of sort of giving some reassurance to that question, Simon, I think the monitoring facilities at the moment are there through to March. We would anticipate that there will be a continuing monitoring presence. I think there's a question mark about whether it needs to be 4 monitors anymore, given what we're seeing in the data. So we may reduce the number, but we are committed to seeing them out for longer than beyond March.
Okay, if I could come back there, Ian, if that's okay. Just
yeah,
thank you for that. I think that's a good response. I think I've been on this committee for long enough, and a lot of people have to know when we had an argument about maintaining monitoring, and I feel as if the EA had maintained monitoring earlier, we could have kept on top of this, but they removed them. And I think really, just to plead that this liaison committee is heavily involved in the decision to whether there is a reduction in the number of monitors or where they are positioned, if there are less. I think I'd look for that commitment from the EA that they will not only the SCG but also this community forum would have a say in it as well. That's my follow-up question, and then I'll remain my hand up for Derek, who can come in later on your list, Chair. Yeah.
Ollie's put their hand down now, so Andrew,
I'm happy to come back on that if you want, Ian. I think that that's a very sensible suggestion. So I think in terms of timings, I think given the next meeting of this, I think this meeting's quarterly. I think we can bring some proposals and take some thoughts from the this liaison committee in the future of the monitoring.
Okay, Derek, I believe you had a question.
Two questions, right, for the Environmental Agency, right. The first question is Saturday and a Sunday, right? We seem to, or I seem to get more complaints about the stink, as they call it. Right? Don't you monitor it weekends, or does anything really happen at weekends? Because I don't think after Saturday dinner, I don't think the company are really on site after that time, are they? So what happens? Right? Is there some downfall there by the Environmental Agency and the company, or aren't they working together on it? I just don't know. Can you answer that question first for me?
I think, Derek, the answer is the monitors are there 24/7. There's nothing changed in terms of our monitoring, and you are right, as far as we're aware, the site don't operate. Certainly from, I think it's Saturday lunchtime, and obviously not aware of them operating on a Sunday. So nothing changes operationally, and obviously the monitors are there 24/7. The only thing I can think of is maybe people are that much more at home, really. So yes, during the working week, Monday to Friday, maybe people are out and about, and therefore not in the area as much. So that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Can I go on to the next question?
Good.
On the next question, right? It's when you look at the scientific, right, side of it, it's a very interesting one, right, which the Environmental Agency is supposed to be really looking at. When you talk about the levels of the noise and the dust and the smell and everything else that goes with it, right, on certain levels, I mean, if you take it, and I was an health and safety officer, right, and when you come to look at the levels, let's say same as noise, right, to go by decibels. When you come to look, right, at the gases, right, you look at the gases, and no matter what you do, at the end of the day, it's still in the air. In other words, it's in the atmosphere. Whether it's a terrible smell like they've had in the past, right, and I hope it doesn't come back to that, right, for goodness sake, right, because my phone had never stopped ringing again, right, but they did have a lull, and the Environmental Agency know all about it, where you had a lull in it, right, and then all of a sudden everything seemed as though it was going all right. Then all of a sudden, right, it was like a bomb hit again, right, and we were invaded with serious problems. And I've got to agree with what Councillor Tagg has said on this, right, that the monitoring, right, really we should insist that the Environmental Agency carry on with the monitoring equipment. And the reason I'm saying that, the first monitoring equipment we had, which was down at Silverdale Road on the pumping station, the arguments that I had at the time to get that monitoring done was absolutely unbelievable. And once you take them away, right, then you've got a problem, because it's getting them back again. So I've got to go along with Simon Tagg, right, and say, leave the monitoring equipment there, right, until we can get it down. And you'll never get it to zero, but the lower you can get the gas emissions from going into the atmosphere, the better it will be. And I think the residents would understand that, and it's common sense that you'll never stop it completely. It's an impossibility. No matter how many years you can go in advance, it'll still be somewhere along the line, you'll get that little bit of a whiff. And I think the residents accept that, but they don't want to go back to what it used to be, right? So you've got an opportunity now, right, to stick your foot, leave the monitoring equipment there, right, and let's keep it as low as we possibly can for the sake of the health of all the residents within the area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jack. Was there a question there? More of a statement.
Well, it was a statement plus come question. I mean, in other words, is what I'm saying. Are we definitely going to leave that monitoring equipment there then?
Thank you. Please, with all due respect to everybody, please keep questions brief. Would Mukhtar or Andrew wish to take
I
this?
think Andrew's asked the question.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it, but I think it comes back to the previous answer I gave in that, yeah, as the strategic coordinating group, we are looking right now at the future of the monitoring to fulfill the kind of regulatory requirements and to fulfill the data that the UK Health Security Agency needs to kind of make their assessments. You know, back to what I said earlier, I think at the moment the Environment Agency is committed to the end of March. I think we will be monitoring beyond that, but the exact nature of that monitoring, I still think we need to kind of do the assessments about what's necessary.
Appreciate it, Andrew, taking as read. Yeah, without repeating. Jacqueline, I do apologise for the delay. Thank you for your patience.
Apologies if you can hear a whinging dog behind me, but some of your some of my answers to my questions been covered by Andrew in terms of sometimes we're not seeing a correlation between the spike in complaints and the actual monitoring of odours. For instance, at the Health and Wellbeing and Environment Committee that I sit on, it was discussed there'd been a spike in complaints in October, but we couldn't really see a pattern on that one. So my question sort of relates to that in that I often get quite very localised different accounts of the stink, in that you could be at Cornerstones Community Centre and it can be horrendous, but somebody on an allotment at the Acres could say that they can't smell it. And I'm wondering what explanation we've got for that very localised difference.
I think it just comes down to dispersion really and topography. So it's very complicated in terms of how air flows and how, you know, the hydrogen sulfide emissions are, you know, spread out. But wind directions play a big part, and that's pretty much it. It's to do with the topography of the site and also conditions in terms of, you know, whether one person at a certain area, you know, may not pick it up at this side, whereas somebody on the other side of the landfill may do. There's no other explanation to it, to be honest.
I think the only thing I would add to that, Jacqueline, is that yes, the airflow can be very different around the site, and there's been some modelling done to show that it's quite complex, the airflow. I think the other factor is people's sensitivity. So as Mukhtar said, the odour threshold that we report on of 7 micrograms per metre cubed, that's the point of the population where 50% of the people will smell it. And the range of people's sensitivity is quite large. So it can be orders of magnitude. So some people will be very much more sensitive to an odour and some people will be very insensitive. So that also plays a part. But the conclusion that we've come to is the same as yours, that there was a time when the data that we were reporting was very kind of representative of what was happening and it correlated really well. So we are thinking now again about what sort of things we report in the future. Because the exceedances when they happen are quite close to the odour threshold now.
Jacqueline, do you have a follow-up there?
No, thank you very much for that.
Okay, I believe Rupert, do you have a brief question?
Yes, thank you. You said about the complaints data becoming maybe less reliable because or tallying less with the general monitoring data. Is it being taken into account a possible reporting fatigue amongst residents, especially those living closest? Because there's only so many times residents will report before they inevitably will get fed up of doing so. I know we encourage them as much as we can to keep reporting, but inevitably this will become, people will be less willing to do it over time. Is this something going forward we're going to take into account?
It's a good question, Rupert. I think if there was a bias in one particular direction, I think I'd understand that a bit more. You know, so if we were seeing when it was above the odour threshold, we weren't seeing complaints, that would make a lot of sense. But it's in both directions. So when it is below the odour threshold, as we measure it, we still see the complaints, and we can still sometimes see quite high complaints. So Mukhtar showed a graph earlier where I think on one of the days we had about 40 complaints. Some days we're getting 20, 30 complaints and we can't see an exceedance from the monitors. And then we'll see an exceedance from the monitors and we'll only see 10 complaints. So that it works both ways. So I don't think that fatigue is the answer to the question why they're becoming more disconnected. I do think, you know, what you describe is possible. that there will be some people who will be becoming fatigued of monitoring, of reporting, but I don't think it's the reason for the decoupling I describe.
I could just add one thing in terms of what Andrew just said. What I will say is, even if complaint numbers are low, it won't mean that our regulatory effort will go down in any way. So obviously we do look at complaint data, but obviously the monitors are still out there. So even though, you know, people may not be complaining, but if we see, you know, a rise in it, what the MMF monitors are picking up, then yes, we will actually go back to the site, you know, has anything, you know, been changed on site and operationally. So yes, even if complaint numbers do go down, it won't necessarily mean that our regulatory effort will go down.
That's encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more hands up. So let's move on to the next item, which is item 7, Newcastle-under-Lyme DHO update.
Thank you, Ian. Obviously, at the start of the meeting, I mentioned about the August complaints came in at 53. September complaints came in at 53. Just as a comparison, that time period last year, we came in at 630 complaints. So we had a good start in September, but as I think Angela mentioned earlier, we do actually track in a similar way the EA complaints. So we saw that peak in October. So the complaints came in at 207, which was comparative to last year. November, the complaints are 146. They were looking at last year's figures, 250, so they came in under that. One of the things that we've looked at in November, we're looking at when we have the peak dates, and that's the 19th of November. That was actually after the pinwells went in. So the pinwells were installed on the 14th of November, the start of that week. So we wondered whether it was tying in with that, the fact that they'd installed them. Had we then seen an increase in complaints? But through our meetings with Wally's Quarry, we understand that's not the case, but we've asked them to just go away and look at why did we get a peak on that period so that we can feed back and learn from that. In December, so obviously I'm tracking that at the moment with this cold spell, we're up to 68 complaints that we've had in. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at the ratings as well that residents are giving it. And we've certainly had some ratings of 4, 5 and 6 coming in on a number of those complaints. When we look at the 68 complaints in December, we're looking to see, have we got complaints from a particular, you know, household, a number of properties? We're coming in at 28 individual properties reporting those complaints. So that is showing that, you know, it is across a community. And the words that they're using to describe the odour are toxic gas, landfill gas, egg, gassy, hydrogen sulfide, but also we've seen rotten food or rotten animal type smell and dirty bins. So it's really saying that, you know, obviously we have got the complaints. They are still coming into our team, but we're looking at how they're tracking over the months and also how they compare to last year. In terms of other complaints that we're receiving, we've had some complaints about dust. We've had 3 complaints come in regarding dust, and they describe it as a plume of dust. Our officers have had a look at that, but the plumes of dust, we haven't found any evidence that that's coming off site. We've also had complaints about the reversing bleeping noise from the vehicles, and that's being investigated. And also, just recently, on the 8th and 9th of December, we've seen complaints come in about seagulls. So saying that the numbers have increased hugely in recent weeks. So we're aware of what Wally's Quarry are doing in terms of trying to monitor and deal with bird control on site.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. Is there any questions for Amanda? is that a physical hand up? I believe, Derek, you have a physical hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, can't help myself.
We're trying to find the button as well at the same time.
Yeah,
go
I
on.
know. I'm
Go on,
sorry
Derek.
about that. Yeah, the report that you've just given is a very interesting report. Can you tell me, is there any way, right, you can find out exactly where and pinpoint where they're getting the most problems? Because my area where I live, up Silverdale Road, Cherry Hill Lane, down there, I aren't getting a lot of these problems. What you were saying, you're getting. All we're getting each over the other side, in the Thistleberry Home Road side, because that's where I believe at this moment in time is where the tipping's going on. Now the seagulls, right? We all know about the seagulls. There's thousands of them, and they've all come at once, right? And what they used to say years ago was that they used to come in for a walk.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Derek.
much.
Obviously, in terms of where the complaints are coming from, we're aware of the addresses, and what I did just prior to this meeting was go back in and have a look at these December complaints, because it's timely to talk about those. So amongst those 68 complaints that you had, I can see that Silverdale 30%, and then I looked at Thistlebury and Gallingale, and that's about 22%. So I think we're going back to what Mukhtar said, where it's quite calm conditions at the moment. So maybe that is why we're getting complaints in areas rather than in one specific area.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, I see no more hands up. So let's move on to the next item, which is item number 8, which is Staffordshire planning update. Neil.
Hi. In terms of our monitoring from the planning regulation team, we haven't had any complaints to deal with since the last meeting. The big thing we've been dealing with from our side has been the planning application, which was to allow waste carrying vehicles to park on the internal haul road between 6 and 7 Monday to Friday. As I previously mentioned, that's now been before our planning committee, who resolved to permit the application. The decision has not yet been issued. Essentially, the committee have resolved to say that it will be approved, but that's subject to determining the precise conditions, which our development control team are just in the process of sorting. Just to mention a couple of points on that, though, that's also been raised earlier. One was Dr. Shikaki-Smith mentioned the previous questions about double parking vehicles and the access for that. The part of the application process, they amended some of the plans to show that vehicles will basically only park on one side of the access road. So that resolved that issue. There will still be access in emergencies there. And I would also just make clear that the red line covering that planning application covers only part of the access road. So essentially the conditions remaining on the rest of the operations on site are completely unchanged, which I think is probably just worth making the point to Councillor Hookfield as well, in that it doesn't permit any changes to allow vehicles to go on site beyond the access road any earlier. And obviously, if they have any complaints about that, any concerns about that going forward in this year, and you're aware of any vehicles, tip in before 7, please do report them to us, because that would be a breach that we could investigate ongoing, unchanged by this application. I think they expect the decision notice to be issued fairly shortly. I have seen draft conditions, and obviously that will be published on our website as and when it's determined. Thanks.
Thank you, Neil. Any questions for Neil, anybody? No, you think you're very scot-free there, Neil. All right, moving on to, oh no, too late. Nearly dropped the hammer there. I believe I first saw a hand up from Simon and Derek.
It's from me again. Sticky hand syndrome. I think Hendrik had the same problem there with pressing the button and it doesn't come on. No, thank you, Neil, for that. Obviously, the planning decision and pending the conditions being sorted out, it is really good. It's just really a question to the company on their view. I know they're obviously preparing to sort of implement this when given permission when necessary, but we'll just it will rely on the company also, doing some work about possibly scheduling, possibly monitoring, possibly saying to certain drivers, like they used to do in the past, that they sort of breaching what would be the reasonable thing to do in this site. I just wanted to see if there was any comment from the company on that.
Thank you for the question, Simon. I think firstly, it's an area that we look at and continue to look at in terms of where we can, working with our customers to make sure that vehicles are scheduled or are staggered, and we do express to our customers to ask them to do that as our standard practice. And we have seen, particularly within the last 3 months or so, where there's been staggered arrival times coming into site. We use our powers in a commercial aspect, because actually we don't have too much authority on them when they're off site. But from a commercial aspect, we do ask our customers to stagger their arrival times where they can, and there has been good evidence to show that that's been happening. So we do continue to deploy those tactics.
Thank you.
I think the part of your question, Simon, was about when we've talked about where necessary and or where necessary, and so if we do need to use it, we will utilise it as and when we need to use to take the benefits of the permission, but we may not need to do it all the time, or we'll use our judgment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Henrik, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Silverdale Parish Council objected to the planning application. I represented that view in the planning committee last week or the week before. Our main concern was about increased vehicle traffic around the quarry site, places like Silverdale Road, Cemetery Road, Keel Road, going through the town. Now, a practical question. If the vehicles are really noisy, 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, how do we report that? How do we evidence that? And who do we report it to?
Any answer to anybody? Neil, I assume it's...
I mean, I thinking specifically of
no, not Neil.
Vehicles coming to the site, or if you're talking of vehicles in the area generally being noisy at 5 AM in the morning, really.
You're on mute, Henry.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I was saying, I live in Silverdale Road. Heavy goods vehicles pass my house every day, about less than 10 metres away from my house. If they are really noisy at 5:30, it wakes me up. If I had some equipment to measure that noise and I could report it somewhere, how would I report it?
I suspect that would probably be an issue covered by the Borough Council Environmental Health, possibly. Perhaps Amanda could confirm that for me. I suspect if it's in terms of it's a nuisance impact on yourself, it would probably come under them. And obviously, it's not specifically something that we'd cover under the planning permission, certainly, because obviously it's outside the site and the remit of the site. And
I think that's quite correct, Neil. Is Amanda would like to?
Yes, I'll take that away, Henrik. Obviously, predominantly the work that we do in terms of nuisance, that we're looking at a person responsible, so a site. So if noise was generated from vehicles entering the site, leaving their engines running, parked up, then obviously we would be able to follow that up. So in terms of noise on the highway, if I take that away and just come back to you direct with how that could be responded to.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. Wallis, you had a brief comment to make at this point?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to confirm a couple of things. If it became an issue and it was notified to us and there were specifically vehicles visiting the quarry, then we'll do what we do now and work with our commercial partners to discourage that. The other point I wanted to make is we obviously won't have the gate open before 6 o'clock. Post 6 o'clock, there is a condition in the planning which the vehicles are required to turn their engines off. So I just wanted to confirm that point as well.
Thank you. Henry, your hand is still up. You don't have any more points? I guess from the silence, no. So moving on to item 9, I'll label this correctly this time. Newcastle Underline planning update. Item 9. You have nothing for that? Right. Okay, we'll move on to item 10 then. Local councils, residents and representatives' comments. I see presently no hands up. So this would be my time, though I'm actually acting as chair here. This where as a resident, there's some comments I do have. I've crossed out most of these on the way because people have answered them or asked these questions already. I understand that the EGNIOL report was mentioned right at the start. This is to EA, I do apologise. That would be the gas sim model. I'm still looking out for the AirMod model that's been promised at the start of the year. I've not seen evidence of that yet. So is that still incoming? Or have I just not been sent an email?
That's right. Is that the air quality monitoring exercise that was done by the site? Is that what you're after?
There was an AirMod. Yes, I think it was done by the site. It was AirMod based, so it's not gas sim.
Yeah, so that exercise was completed. I'm happy to send you a copy of that. Alternatively, I'm sure that Wally's Quarry could submit that to you as well. But yeah, I'll forward that on to you.
That's much appreciated. That's very helpful, actually. We talked about the timings. Okay, the rest, I believe, apart from one, which is this is to Amanda at EHO. You are obviously been taking various comments and complaints and such. Do you actually, this is not EA's policy to actually, when somebody reports a number, to say that number means this, is this what you're reporting? Do you have that policy where they just say a number? And of course, I know what the number means, but the general populace may not know what 4, 5 and 6 actually mean. Do you do a confirmation back to them?
On the online form, there is an indication of what that means. So there's some descriptive there. So it'll say strong, very strong, and then that equates to that number. So the residents themselves are reporting in accordance with that descriptor. And then obviously we have officers that also go out doing odour assessments as well in the area. But what they do is obviously they're focusing their resource in terms of what complaints, peak periods of complaints, any trending that we're seeing.
No, thank you. No, that's good to know, actually. That's good to know. Right, the rest of my residents' comments or questions, probably more correctly put, would be to Wally's, I believe. Right, there was mention of gas in your presentation, and an uptick in gas production, obviously. When are we expecting, maybe it's just a reminder, expecting peak gas production? And I know you've been stepping up various mitigations, and obviously you're very good that we're seeing that you're having an uptick in your odour assessment walks and such. But when are we expecting peak gas at Wally's Quarry?
Ian, can I check the gas sim model to make sure I give you the most recent figures, and I'll happily send that over to you.
Thank you much. Okay, now this is again to Wally's. Now, obviously, most of these models, even this AirMod one, will be based on surrogates. Is there any? I've asked. I think I might have asked before, so I don't wish to repeat it too much. But is any consideration of actually olfactometric odour testing of the landfill site and modelling that? Until I see the previous report, it'll give you some framework. But any recommendations of that report maybe that actually requested real odour, not just a surrogate?
There's no plans to pick that up at the moment, Ian, but we are already doing additional FID surveys, and they're submitted and discussed with the regulator, and the actions are closed out from that and pursued. And also we do the flux box surveys, and that's in addition to all the odour tours as well. So there's quite a compendium of actions we're deploying already in that area.
Fantastic. Obviously, there's still an uptick. I assume there's still an uptick in infill rates of the landfill. Obviously, people are asking me, obviously, with the impending economic downturn, or is that going to affect the infill rates? Is that what you're expecting?
Just on the first part of your question, Ian, there's the uptick that you reference. I'm not familiar with the input into Wally's is relatively stable and in line with the current planned volume. So we haven't seen an uptick. It's relatively within what you'd expect, stable. At the moment, we're not seeing a reduction based on the impending or the forecasted reduction in our economy. That may happen, but at the moment, we're not seeing it.
Okay. And I do apologise in advance for this one. This is rumour quashing. Somebody specifically asked me a question. I said, well, I do speak on the liaison committee. I'll mention this. It's and you may claim client confidentiality about this one, but there is a rumour that somebody wanted me to ask about. JCB have stopped using your facilities because of alleged illegal activities, is the rumour. Could you just quash that rumour, please?
Well, JCB have actually never been a customer of Wally's Quarry Limited.
Ah, good. Well, thank you very much for quashing that. Okay, I see that Rupert has his hand
up. Yes, my question's actually about this committee itself. Is there scope for this committee to include other local representatives who wish to attend? For example, I note that Councillor Huckfield isn't actually a regular member of this committee, but should be as a councillor for Silverdale and Nutton and Keele. Is there a scope, and who do we petition to expand this committee for other local representatives? Is that possible?
I'll hand that to Wally's because it's their question.
Yes, Rupert, we're as part of our mediation agreement with the Newcastle under Lyme Borough Council, we had agreed to discuss how we would rejuvenate this committee. So these are so the questions that you're asking, or the observations you make, are being taken under consideration.
Okay. I see Angela just beat Simon to it. So Angela first, please.
Sorry, yes. Do we know the final height before the final capping takes place? I think that was raised at the last meeting as a question.
Yeah. Angela, I don't have the exact figure to hand, but I'm more than happy to send on confirmation of the restoration contours outside of this meeting.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Simon and Derek.
Yeah, this one's from me. Thank you. Rupert, just to follow up Rupert's point, I think, which is a valid one. Obviously, we know now that these meetings will be recorded and then put onto a platform that anybody can view them after, which I think is really good and what the community have been looking for. But I think that sort of refresh of the committee is really key. So I heard obviously the operator company's response. Could you put a timescale on that? Because I think it's really important that we do move forward with the refresh of this and actually have those local representatives and possibly representatives of the local community. Just for Derek, for Rupert's information, Derek is the second county council's rep and was appointed 2 years ago and reappointed this year, so he has a right to be here. But I agree with you, Rupert, we need obviously true local community representation on this committee as well, to supplement Ian particularly, who's a local resident, as we know. Thank you.
Yeah, Simon, I'm not prepared to put a timescale on it or commit to a timescale at this stage. This is part of an ongoing discussion between us and Newcastle under Lyme.
Okay, Robert, I believe your hand came up. Can you hear me, Robert? Unless that's a mistaken hand up. I see.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear you now?
I'm not good with the technology. Anyway, yes, I heard about the pest management plan. Just to say, there was comments about rodents and things that were thought to be coming off the site in the vicinity of the caravan park. Now, I'm not taking a judgment at all. It was an issue that was raised, and so I'm speaking then as a ward councillor and just asking Wally's Quarry to ensure that appropriate measures are taken. I'm looking for a reassurance, basically.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Robert. The pest management plan, and again, you are welcome to a copy of that. The programme is carried out by experts appointed by us in pest management, which includes the rodent treatments, and they are effective and they are in place. And we'll keep monitoring those as part of our daily checks, as we always do.
Thank you. Andrew, is that an old hand up before I move on to Simon and Derek? I take it silence as a yes, it's an old hand up. Okay, Simon and Derek.
Yeah, can I just ask two questions, really, right? The first question, right, is when they do the boreholes, right? It's been said earlier, right, on the boreholes, when they drill the boreholes, there's no gas leaks and nothing like that. Now that's completely different, right, from what the environmental agency informed me of. That's saying that when they do the boreholes, right, there is a tendency to have leaks of gas. Can you just clarify that a little bit for me? Because it's a bit confusing. Nobody going to speak?
Give him a chance, Derek.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we've conflicted on the mic. Derek, I'm a little unclear whether your question was directed to the Environment Agency or to Wally's Quarry, but just to give some input. So the pin wells that were done recently are installed really quickly, so within 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. So the opportunity to have an impact is very, very, very small. In terms of the drilling of the infrastructure on site, be it gas infrastructure or expansion of leachate systems, it's been done recently under a system that allows extraction at the head, so where they're actually drilling and installing the well, and that extractive air is put through carbon and scrubbed. So we don't recognise the situation you described, and the agency would have to give you more details.
Yeah, I think at this point, Mukhtar may have something to say. He's put his hand up.
Thank you. And I think what Derek may be referring to is, I know in the past when we've sent out some communication, just advising members of the public on our Citizen Space website that their work is due to be planned in terms of, drilling of gas extraction boreholes and so on. I think what we've said in our past communication is really that the potential for fugitive emissions when gas wells are drilled is that slightly higher. That's not to say that there are increased in fugitive emissions or complaint numbers are going to increase when this work happens. It's just the potential. So yes, that may explain what Derek's querying and possible reason why I think this may be a bit of a conflict in terms of what we're saying and what the site is saying.
Thank you. I believe we do have a couple of old hands. Angela and Robert, you have an old hand up, but we'll come back to Derek's second question. Derek, you had a second question.
Can I just say, first of all, you riddled around that very nicely, right? On my second question, right, that it took some time for me to get back onto this committee, even though I'm a councillor, and yet we've got other people on the committee, right, that don't even live within the area. I wonder
if stop you there and maybe direct that towards Wally's. I know what you're about to say, and Wally's may want to say something at this point, because they get to choose who comes on the 106 committee.
Tom.
Yeah. So Derek, your question?
My question is, why are people on this committee that don't live within the area? Right, the idea of a liaison committee, when it was set up by Staffordshire County Council, just same as any other committee, right, is people who are the councillors and the representatives of that area, right, even residents of that area, right, can be on the committee. And yet I'm asking you the question, why is it we've got somebody on this committee, right, that isn't even, right, a person that lives within the area? Surely the people on this committee should be the people, right, who represent that area, not people that live outside. And I'm just asking the question, why is it, right, that you're allowing that to happen under the 106 agreement, which I've got a copy of the 106 agreement, just the same as I've got with Ipstocks and everybody else's, right? And I want to know why, right, we've got people on the committee, right, that shouldn't really ought to be on. That's the question I'm asking.
Okay, Derek, thank you very much. I'm glad you've got a copy of the section 106 of our planning and our liaison group committee. And you'll see the structure of that, the structure that we are trying to adhere to. And it's really good to see everybody back on here tonight. And we're also looking to refresh the committee and add other relevant members. And I believe that Nigel is working with the Borough Council, and we've had some extra contacts from there that we're pursuing. I'm not happy to go into why individuals are here or not here. We're looking to refresh the committee. We're looking to get feedback from the relevant people, and I believe that's what we're achieving in this.
Can I just say, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it there, right, and I'll see what happens.
Much appreciated.
Okay.
Okay, I see no more hands up. I believe that ends item 10 and on to item 11, which is any other business. Do you have any other business? I see no hands. I see one hand. Wally's. So that'd be John, maybe.
You know the really dull question I'm going to ask, Ian, which is the date and the time for the next meeting.
Absolutely.
So we can all have that scheduled in our diaries.
Absolutely. You have any suggestions? Usually suggest and we see as to whether we've got it free.
Might I suggest March the 16th? I know that Henrik, sometimes these clash with parish council meetings, and if other councillors, if they're clashing, there's some latitude to move that. But obviously we'd rather make it so the availability is there for as many people to join as within the group.
If you put your hand up if you have any problems with that date, 16th of March 2023.
Okay, we're okay with that here, Ian.
Okay, thank you.
Just only put your hand up if you have a problem. I see no hands up. I think that's a perfectly good date, it seems.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Okay, I think that finishes our festivities for the evening. Well, thank you all for turning up. Thank you for your succinct questions and answers. I believe we got through a larger panel of people's queries and answered sufficiently. If you need to follow up on emails, by all means, please. I would like to see, some things come down the email course. And I'll just say, well, everybody have a happy Christmas.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Happy Christmas, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Don't forget.
Thank you all.
Thanks.